Hitchcock just came right across my vision and blocked him out and stood talking to me and kept my attention on him and things like that.
Digital media platforms consistently circulate reports asserting that Julie Andrews recently published a definitive list of her 6 favorite films. Despite the persistence of these articles and the specific titles they repeatedly cite, the foundational claim is entirely inaccurate. She has never released such a formalized ranking. Few performers in the history of cinema have maintained the enduring public image of elegance that Julie Andrews has cultivated over the course of her extensive career. Long before she reached her teenage years, her distinctive soprano voice had already filled prominent concert halls. Her public persona has always been characterized by precise diction, flawless posture, and a seemingly effortless stage presence. However, operating behind this highly polished professional image, and behind the universally recognized characters of the magical nanny with the umbrella and the singing Austrian governess, is an actor whose career is defined by calculated reinvention, professional resilience, and a consistent refusal to be entirely defined by her early successes. Born on October 1st, 1935, in Walton-on-Thames, England, her ascension in the entertainment industry was not the result of sudden fortune. She built her professional foundation methodically, beginning with rigorous wartime radio broadcasts as a child, and eventually securing demanding leading roles in the original Broadway productions of My Fair Lady and Camelot. Following these theatrical triumphs, her transition into the Hollywood studio system was marked by immediate, monumental success. With the consecutive releases of Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, she achieved a level of global fame that most performers never experience. She secured an Academy Award for Best Actress at the age of 29 and solidified her status as a cinematic icon before reaching her 30th birthday. In early 2026, at 90 years old, Andrews remains a sharp, thoughtful, and active participant in the entertainment industry. Concurrently, a persistent narrative continues to propagate across social media networks, frequently utilizing headlines that claim, at 94, Julie Andrews names her 6 favorite movies. While some variations of this digital rumor claim the list contains 7 films rather than 6, all iterations falsely imply that she formally categorized her cinematic legacy near the end of her life. The origin of this pervasive myth likely stems from the internet's tendency to aggregate isolated quotes from disparate, decades-old interviews and reshape that nuanced information into highly clickable, definitive statements. When directly questioned in past interviews regarding her absolute favorite film project, Andrews explicitly rejected the premise of the question. She noted that selecting a single favorite performance would be akin to choosing a favorite puppy from a basket. This response reflects an artist who views her extensive body of work not as a hierarchical competition, but as distinct chapters of a long professional life, with each project tied to specific personal seasons, varying emotional states, and unique creative collaborations. Nevertheless, through scattered discussions over many decades, she has consistently highlighted certain films that hold deep personal significance. Examining these specific projects provides a much more accurate representation of her artistic priorities than any fabricated internet ranking. Number 6. The Americanization of Emily. Immediately following the unprecedented success of Mary Poppins, the Hollywood studio apparatus naturally expected Andrews to capitalize on her established momentum by accepting another lighthearted musical role. Instead, she made the deliberate and unexpected decision to star in a stark, black-and-white wartime satire. She later admitted that the prospect of filming The Americanization of Emily left her intensely terrified. This fear did not stem from the size of the role or the quality of the script, but rather from the complete absence of musical numbers.
Little hotel rooms, bed and breakfast for a guinea. I paid the guinea myself more often than not.
For a performer whose singing voice had served as her primary professional armor since childhood, stepping onto a film set without the structural safety net of music represented a profound professional risk. The narrative of the 1964 film is inherently challenging. James Garner portrays an American Navy officer stationed in World War II who is entirely dedicated to self-preservation and the avoidance of combat, actively rejecting the traditional archetypes of the heroic martyr. Andrews was cast as Emily, a British woman who has been severely hardened by the devastating realities of the conflict, having already lost both her father and her fiancé to the war. The film operates as a sharp, intelligent, and frequently uncomfortable satire rather than a romanticized depiction of military heroism. Andrews characterized the screenplay as exceptional and described the production process as a highly positive experience. This assertion is particularly notable given that she had just secured an Academy Award and could have easily chosen a project designed to protect her newly established, pristine public image. Garner later stated that this production was the favorite among his own filmography, noting a deep mutual respect between the two leads. He recounted an instance of attempting to warm her freezing feet on set, humorously noting that he would not offer such a gesture to just any co-star. Decades later, during a televised interview with Larry King, Andrews referred to the production as a small classic. The film served as undeniable proof that her capabilities extended far beyond vocal performance and cheerful charm, demonstrating her ability to anchor complex, dramatic narratives and hold silent, emotional stillness on screen. Number 5. 10. By the late 1970s, the landscape of mainstream cinema had shifted toward grittier, more cynical narratives, and the idealized innocence of the previous decade was no longer a guaranteed commercial draw. In 1979, Andrews accepted a role in the comedy film 10, directed by her husband, Blake Edwards.
Not we have, you have. I don't need to peep into somebody else's windows to get my jollies.
The casting choice placed the actor previously associated with absolute wholesomeness into the role of a woman dealing with a partner actively spiraling into a severe midlife crisis. The narrative centers on Dudley Moore's character, George Weber, a highly successful and wealthy man who becomes dangerously fixated on a younger stranger he observes during a wedding procession. Andrews portrays Weber's girlfriend, Samantha. The script could have easily relegated Samantha to the position of a passive victim, but Andrews played the character with a grounded, intelligent demeanor, projecting a sense of detached amusement at her partner's foolish behavior. Film critic Roger Ebert highlighted the role as a delightful stabilizing force within the narrative. Samantha serves as the necessary emotional counterweight to Weber's obsessive and chaotic actions. Andrews later identified 10 as one of her favorite experiences among the numerous films she made in collaboration with Edwards. The production was highly significant behind the scenes, as its immense box office success successfully revitalized Edwards' directing career following a series of commercial failures. The film resonated with audiences by confronting uncomfortable themes of aging, misplaced desire, and the fear of ordinary existence. Throughout the narrative, Andrews' character maintains absolute dignity, refusing to resort to dramatic collapses or desperate pleas. Her ability to project power through restrained reactions rather than explosive dialogue marked a significant evolution in her cinematic approach. Number 4. SOB. In 1981, Andrews participated in a project that directly challenged the boundaries of her public persona. SOB operated as a scathing Hollywood satire that critics debated fiercely, with some condemning it as excessively mean-spirited and others praising it as a brilliant exposure of industry hypocrisy.
But I just cannot.
Sally.
No, Cully.
Sweetheart, will you
no,
please?
Felix. No, no, no.
Blake Edwards utilized the film to process his own highly negative experiences with studio interference, particularly the intense executive meddling that had severely damaged his earlier production. Darling Lily. The narrative specifically skewered film producers and mocked the fundamental illusion of creative control in the studio system. At the center of this confrontational narrative was Andrews, cast as a highly successful, exceptionally wholesome movie star who is relentlessly pressured by executives into performing a topless scene in order to salvage a failing film production. Andrews was understandably nervous about the role, as the performance required her to directly confront and deconstruct the exact commodification of purity that the industry had forced upon her for decades. The eventual reveal within the film generated significant controversy, prompting gasps and walkouts from certain segments of the audience, while others applauded the audacity of the statement. Reflecting on the experience in subsequent years, Andrews stated that the production was highly enjoyable, specifically attributing that joy to the company of actors and crew involved in the project. The role functioned as a definitive dismantling of the pedestal of purity upon which the industry had placed her. Following the release of SOB, it became impossible for studios or audiences to comfortably box her back into the restrictive stereotype of the sweet, uncomplicated soprano. She proved her willingness to completely fracture her own established image rather than spend her career safely protecting it. Number 3, That's Life. By 1986, Andrews possessed the artistic freedom to pursue projects devoid of standard studio pressures. That's Life originated not as a grandly financed Hollywood production, but as a deeply personal concept formulated by Blake Edwards while at their home in Malibu.
But it does have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're going to have something wonderful to show for it, hon.
The film was shot entirely inside their actual residence, utilizing a cast that included several family members. The dialogue was not rigidly scripted, but rather built dynamically from a loose 16-page narrative outline, allowing scenes to unfold through controlled improvisation. The plot follows a highly successful architect portrayed by Jack Lemmon, who begins to mentally unravel as he approaches his 60th birthday. Andrews plays his wife, a woman who projects outward calm while internally carrying her own severe anxieties. The central tension for her character revolves around waiting for the biopsy results of a suspicious throat lesion, forcing the character, a singer, to face the terrifying possibility of permanently losing her voice. In a stark example of art foreshadowing reality, Andrews would undergo a surgical procedure years later that would permanently damage her own vocal cords. At the time of filming in 1986, however, she was simply exploring a dramatic scenario. Andrews later noted that the film remained very dear to her heart, largely due to the authentic nature of the production process. The environment blurred the distinct lines between professional performance and personal truth, with their children present on set and close friends drifting in and out of the improvised scenes. The film lacks the polished gloss of her most iconic works, opting instead for a raw, messy, and fundamentally human exploration of aging and anxiety. Number 2. Duet for One. Also released in 1986, Duet for One required Andrews to navigate entirely different emotional territory.
Anyway, when I recovered enough to feel anything at all, I realized that it wasn't the violin I needed, but the music itself.
The film features no comedic relief, no glamorous aesthetics, and no satirical edge. Andrews portrays Stephanie Anderson, a world-class, highly demanding violinist who discovers she is suffering from multiple sclerosis. The narrative documents the slow, agonizing betrayal of her own body as her physical control deteriorates and her core identity begins to fracture. Roger Ebert noted that the film successfully avoided the predictable trappings of a sentimental illness drama. Instead, it presented an unflinching portrait of a woman who reacts to her diagnosis with intense anger and stubborn denial. The character refuses to surrender quietly or gracefully, frequently pushing away those attempting to offer support. Andrews fully committed to portraying a character who is frequently unlikable, abrasive, and fundamentally unsafe. Despite the high caliber of the central performance, the film failed to achieve commercial success and quickly disappeared from theaters. Years later, Andrews explicitly stated that she believed the project deserved significantly more attention than it received upon release. The role forced her to strip away her trademark elegance and explore the profound psychological impact of losing the singular talent that defines one's existence. The thematic weight of a soul desiring to perform while trapped in an uncooperative body serves as another haunting parallel to the vocal loss Andrews would later experience in her own life. Number 1. Victor/Victoria. Set in the theatrical world of 1930s Paris, the 1982 film Victor/Victoria presented a premise reliant upon complex layers of disguise and performance. Andrews was tasked with playing a woman who is pretending to be a man, who is in turn pretending to be a female impersonator.
Well, if we decide to live apart, one of us can set up housekeeping in the tub.
To Victor?
When Blake Edwards initially pitched the concept, Andrews expressed significant hesitation regarding whether an audience would genuinely believe her in the role of a man, or if the premise would simply collapse into unintentional comedy. Edwards assured her that absolute commitment to the internal logic of the film would secure the audience's belief. Andrews adapted her physical presence accordingly. She altered her hair, adjusted her posture, and lowered her vocal register just enough to blur the lines of identity without becoming entirely unrecognizable. The film's centerpiece, the musical number Lee Jazz Hot, demonstrated her continued command of the screen. However, the endurance of the film relies on the thematic tension generated alongside her co-stars. James Garner portrays a tough gangster experiencing profound confusion over his attraction to the character of Victor, while Robert Preston plays the witty showman who orchestrates the elaborate deception. The film was notably daring for mainstream cinema in the early 1980s, openly featuring gay characters and utilizing gender performance as a vehicle for intelligent satire. The script questioned traditional concepts of masculinity without resorting to cruelty. Andrews later observed that the film initially found its greatest success in cosmopolitan cities, acknowledging that some broader audiences were not yet prepared for the subject matter. Over time, however, the film's reputation expanded significantly. Her fearless exploration of identity within the narrative earned her another Academy Award nomination and further proved her remarkable ability to pivot, adapt, and challenge the expectations of her audience. The illusion of perfection. When the general public reflects upon the legacy of Julie Andrews, their collective memory rarely focuses on her satirical roles or her explorations of midlife existentialism. Instead, her legacy is dominated by the cultural monoliths of Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. Released merely 1 year apart, these two films permanently sealed her status as an industry legend. Yet, the effortless perfection projected on screen masks the grueling physical realities of the actual productions. The iconic opening sequence of The Sound of Music, featuring Maria spinning joyfully in an alpine meadow, was achieved only through severe physical endurance. Andrews later detailed the reality of the shoot, explaining that the helicopter utilized to capture the sweeping aerial footage generated a massive, punishing downdraft. During every pass, the force of the wind repeatedly knocked her flat into the grass. Despite her attempts to signal the pilot to widen the flight pattern, the passes continued while crew members hidden in the nearby tree line shouted instructions through loudspeakers. Her experience on Mary Poppins carried different but equally demanding technical challenges. As her feature film debut, the production required her to rapidly learn the complex mechanics of acting, opposite invisible animated elements, and navigating the heavy machinery of a major Disney set. She later credited the intense environment as the perfect training ground for learning the precise technical craft of film acting. However, the immediate success of the film led to deep concerns regarding repetition. When offered the role of Maria von Trapp, she hesitated, fearing she would become permanently trapped in a cycle of playing sweet musical caretakers. She nearly declined the role that would ultimately cement her cinematic immortality. She ultimately accepted, learned to play the guitar, and endured exhausting location shoots, accepting the paradox that the role would both elevate and narrowly define her public image for decades. Range beyond the spotlight. The immense gravity of her most famous musical roles often eclipses a series of dramatic performances that clearly demonstrate her desire for artistic range. In the 1966 epic Hawaii, she played Jerusha Bromley, a missionary's wife enduring severe cultural isolation in the Pacific. The role required immense stoicism and restraint, completely devoid of musical numbers or glamorous aesthetics. Her daughter, Emma Walton Hamilton, later singled out this specific, understated performance as one of her mother's absolute strongest on-screen achievements. She continually sought out varied directors and genres, working alongside Paul Newman in Alfred Hitchcock's Cold War thriller Torn Curtain. During the production, Hitchcock reportedly complained that she possessed an underlying strength and confidence that conflicted with his vision for a submissive, pliable female lead. She also accepted the grueling central role in the 1968 biographical musical Star, portraying Gertrude Lawrence. While the film struggled commercially and divided critical opinion, her commitment to the exhaustive production demonstrated a continued willingness to embrace significant professional risks. Projects such as The Tamarind Seed and A Fine Romance did not dominate global headlines, but they served the crucial function of expanding her dramatic repertoire and proving her commitment to challenging material regardless of guaranteed box office returns. Reinvention following tragedy. In the late 1990s, Andrews faced an unimaginable professional crisis. A surgical procedure intended to remove non-cancerous nodules from her throat resulted in permanent damage to her vocal cords. For an artist whose generational impact was heavily defined by a pristine, crystalline soprano voice, the physical loss was devastating. Andrews publicly acknowledged the event as a major personal tragedy. Rather than retreating from public life or fading quietly into retirement, she executed a massive professional pivot. She channeled her creative energies into literature, co-authoring more than 30 children's books alongside her daughter. Their collaborative works focused heavily on themes of imagination, the theater arts, and personal courage. They subsequently established their own publishing imprint and advocated extensively for childhood literacy programs, effectively transforming a profound personal loss into an avenue for generational mentorship. Simultaneously, she experienced a massive resurgence in cinematic recognition among younger demographics. Her casting as Queen Clarisse in The Princess Diaries introduced her to a generation of viewers who were entirely unfamiliar with her earlier musical legacy. She transitioned heavily into highly successful voice acting, lending her talents to major animated franchises including Despicable Me, Shrek, and Aquaman. Most notably, she assumed the role of the narrator in the immensely popular historical drama series, Bridgerton. Her vocal delivery in the series is characterized by a sultry, controlled, and deeply ironic tone, providing absolute proof that her instrument remained incredibly powerful and effective even without her singing capabilities. She has since stated that despite the loss of her singing voice, she considers herself one of the luckiest people alive, showcasing a rare and profound perspective on artistic reinvention. The artists who shaped her. Understanding the career trajectory of Julie Andrews requires examining the artists she actively admired during her formative years. In a 2001 interview, when asked about the performers who most heavily influenced her understanding of acting, she immediately cited the complete filmography of Bette Davis. Davis was fundamentally not known for projecting sweetness or passive charm. Her performances were defined by sharp angles, abrasive dialogue, and an iron will. Furthermore, Andrews singled out Marlon Brando's intensely raw performance in the film Viva Zapata as a major point of inspiration. Brando's approach to acting was characterized by volatility, inhabiting roles with an unpredictable and dangerous energy that contrasted entirely with the polished studio fantasies Andrews was often asked to lead. It is a quiet irony that while global audiences placed Andrews on a pedestal of wholesome perfection, she was meticulously studying and admiring performers renowned for shattering expectations and prioritizing psychological depth over comfortable aesthetics. This admiration provides essential context for her continuous drive to transform her own career rather than simply preserve her initial success. The philosophy of collaboration. The defining characteristic of Julie Andrews' career may ultimately be her profound humility within an industry fundamentally driven by ego. Despite winning an Academy Award, receiving a damehood from Queen Elizabeth II, and starring in some of the most successful films in cinematic history, she consistently refuses to speak in definitive absolutes regarding her own legacy. When pressed to rank her films, she declines. When discussing her unprecedented early success, she frequently attributes it to luck and timing rather than inherent superiority. When detailing the production process of her major films, she consistently directs praise toward her directors, co-stars, and crew members before acknowledging her own contributions. She has stated that her career choices were guided by an instinctual feeling of whether a script felt emotionally honest rather than calculating its potential for industry awards. While she openly admits to regretting certain professional choices, she has never engaged in the aggressive competition that defines Hollywood. The absence of a formalized ranking of her favorite films is not an oversight. It is a direct reflection of an artist who views the reduction of art to numerical lists as fundamentally flawed. The digital headlines proclaiming she has named her 6 favorite films are unequivocally false. She has never published such a list. What she has provided over decades of public life is a detailed record of the experiences that shaped her. The films she highlights, from the terrifying dramatic leap of The Americanization of Emily to the quiet, family-driven improvisation of That's Life, represent the milestones of a performer who continually sought vulnerability, transformation, and creative expansion. The enduring legacy of Julie Andrews is not built upon a definitive ranking of flawless achievements, but rather upon her remarkable humanity, her professional resilience, and her unwavering courage to constantly redefine her own capabilities.